Welcome, and join me as I rank 25 Christmas horror movies on the 25th of December. Special little treat for the month of December, I decided to watch 25 different Christmas horror movies. If you want to know the titles of them all, I have them in the description below. You can let me know if you agree with how I ranked all these. They're a lot different. Lovely thing about Christmas is you get such a variety. You get killers, Santa Claus, elves, reindeer, there's anthologies. There is a little bit of everything. And then one new Christmas horror trope that I learned that I'll save for about halfway through the video. Alright, so let's kick things off with the worst of the worst that I watched this entire time. And that is number 25. Jack Frost 2. So, Jack Frost 2 is the sequel to Jack Frost, the maniacal serial killer who was dissolved by acid and became a snowman. And this one, you end up going to the Hawaii type scene on the beach. I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. He travels alongside a boat. He can end up making the island freeze. He looks atrocious. The CGI for watching him disappear is ridiculously bad. Early 1990s CGI, roughly, maybe. It's the worst thing you've ever seen. And then he has babies that he pukes out, which look like styrofoam balls that were glued together so much so that they couldn't even sand the edges to make it a round, smooth, glued together job. Yes, that was the bottom of the barrel. Coming in at 24, I have a movie that was rated very, very highly on a lot of websites, but I did not really care for it, so controversial or not, 24 is Rare Exports, A Christmas Tale. This is a foreign film, and if you've seen it, you know what it's about. It's a very slow burn movie, which is not usually up my alley, so that probably hurt it a little bit. And the movie kind of builds up a little bit of tension as it goes along, but not a whole lot. And yeah, the kicker would have to be the ending. For about the last 25 minutes of the movie, you get to see about 180 naked men running around. All, old men that look like Santa Claus. And these are the rare exports that they'll eventually sell as Santa Clauses to everybody around the world because they killed the actual traditional Santa Claus, which looks like a giant beast with horns, and you don't even get a cool ending for the killing of that either. Overall, I just thought this movie was lackluster, and I did not like the ending. It did not save it with the little fun twist. 23, I have Deathcember, which I watched on Peacock, which is a anthology movie, a bunch of short stories. I believe there's 24 of them, and they kind of all open a door to an advent calendar. And it's kind of hard to rank this one among other films because it's not like a sequential story of what's going on, but you do get a bunch of little stories. A couple of them had decent special effects. A couple of them made me laugh. But if you've never heard of it, that's probably because 95% of these stories are terrible and atrocious. So there was a few that made me giggle. It got to be a little bit higher than two other movies. Right. Number 22, I got Christmas, Bloody Christmas, which on paper sounds like it would be a great movie. You've got a Terminator-esque character who is going around killing a bunch of people. He's dressed as Santa Claus, and he does a lot of fun, brutal deaths. There's great heavy metal. But the worst part about this movie is the final girl, who is obnoxious and annoying the entire movie. And since she's the final girl, you don't get a break from it. So all hour and 20 minutes, guess what? You have to deal with an annoying character the whole time. So much so that even some cool kills and this never-ending beast that keeps coming after her doesn't save this film at all. 21, I have I Trapped the Devil. Again, a very highly rated movie, but it's a slow burn movie, so for me it's not that much fun. And this one does a good job building up a lot of atmosphere in the slow burn, but the problem is there's no payoff whatsoever. It leaves the movie very ambiguous at the end, so you kind of can piece it all together yourself. There's a little bit of a tidbit at the very end to be kind of like a, bet you didn't see that coming, but kind of had a gut feeling that's where it was going to go. So a slow burn with no payoffs, and it gives you the ending that you might expect when you're watching it. Just can't rate it as high as everybody else. Coming in at 20 is Red Christmas. This is a movie that is a B-rate movie. The graphics are definitely that way, but you do get some practical effects and you get some fun kills. And this whole movie kind of centers around one thing. It's the only thing that I could think of when I thought of this movie after I watched it, and that is the word abortion. Because we get hit over the head with an abortion thing in the beginning, and the main central character who is going around doing the killing in this movie happens to be a person who was supposed to be aborted, but something went wrong or it got stopped and he ended up surviving. And when he gets shunned by his own mother, he goes around killing everybody in the family. It's got a fun slasher aesthetic to it. You're out in the snow. You get the Christmas vibes with all these movies, so that makes it a little bit fun. But overall, the acting for the most part is very, very bad, even if we do have a horror legend in this movie herself. Number 19, I have All the Creatures Were Stirring, another anthology movie, but this one was only, I think, 6 short stories, and most of them were all pretty decently done. It's not high quality type movie, but it has its good parts in it, and a couple of the stories I thought were executed very, very well, to the point where it put it above the rest of the movies on this list up to this point. One in particular was a lot of fun with kind of a gift-giving experience amongst people in an office. I like that one quite a bit. Even the Demon with the Birthday of Christmas was a fun one, and the Blitzen one gave us at least one good killer reindeer movie in this set of movies I watched, so it pops down at number 19. All right. Coming in at 18, Christmas Evil. This movie, I believe, was from 1980, and it follows the story of a man who just kind of has some stuff mentally wrong with him. He wants to give back to children, sort of. He just has kind of a weird life. It's a weird head-spinny follow of what's going on for a guy in Christmas, and he ends up dressing up as Santa Claus, and he goes around doing both good and bad deeds, killing people that have wronged him, but then he's also dancing and celebrating at a party with a bunch of parents and children that all love Santa Claus, so he steals a bunch of presents from a toy shop, ends up taking them to like an orphanage and giving them to kids who don't have any gifts. So it's like a weird vibe type of movie between the both, but it has kind of a fun little ending in it, and it has a fun twist to the end of it. Oh, it falls in there at 18. 17, I have The Lodge, and this is pretty much a movie that follows the story called The Turning of the Screw. The best part about this movie is all of the acting is very good in it. The story itself is decent, but it's still kind of a slow burn. It has some very good cinematography in it. And it does have a few surprises along the way that'll really kind of get you. If you haven't seen it, it's a decent watch. Most of the movies from this point on are at least a 3 out of 5, maybe even a 3.25 out of 5. And The Lodge is definitely a fun movie, and it's got the kid from Stranger Things in it. It's just an overall okay watch, so it kind of falls in the middle of the pack. 16, I have a movie that for most people falls down at the very bottom, but I went my whole life without watching it, so this was a first time watch. I knew what I was walking into, and it was worth the time spent, and that's Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. A movie that recaps the original, which most people hate, but if you haven't seen the original, that doesn't bother you, so you're along for the ride. You get to see a lot of fun, brutal kills, you get a lot of weird stuff going on, and you get this guy over the top acting to the point where you can't help but laugh at it. So this is one of those ones that ends up being so bad that it's good. And for me, it makes it at number 16. 15, I have Red Snow, a vampire Christmas movie about a woman who's writing a book about vampires, and she ends up finding an injured bat, taking it in her house. Turns out he's a vampire, She nurses him back to health, and she kind of learns more about vampires. There's a little bit of a love story-ish angle in there as well. And then his friends come to get him free. She's exiled, and then we get some standoffs and stuff like that with a great twist ending to it. I thought the movie was fun. It was only about an hour and 20 minutes, so it didn't take a lot of time to get to some of the action and the good stuff. And it was one that had some good character development, which most horror movies aren't very high on. And as I've learned out through this list, a lot of Christmas horror movies do not do character development, so it falls at number 15. 14, I have Saint Nick. I believe this was a Dutch foreign film about a saint who killed a bunch of people on December 5th. And then he was murdered, so then every December 5th, when there is a full moon, he comes back on his ship with all of his elves and wreaks havoc, killing hundreds of people every single time he comes around. And we get some pretty good special effects in this. I mean, you got a dead guy on a horse. I mean, he looks like the Pope carrying this huge weapon that's clearly razor sharp. I mean, we get head chopped off like it's nothing. There's a half dead horse that he's riding. You see running on top of rooftops. There's elves everywhere that are just getting brutally murdered because they're like zombies, or we watch them murdering people. It's just kind of like a horror comedy and a lot of fun. And it's always good to have a nice little fun horror movie in there. If you like the idea of that, I would say check it out. It is a fun watch, and it's only like an hour and a half. So it's easy to get through. All right, number 13. Jack Frost, the original Killer Snowman movie. And this one I find to actually be a lot of fun. This one you have a guy who is kind of a maniac. You see him disintegrated by acid with the snow, but it's something they created so that his molecules meld. And he is a snowman, and he's in a snowy area, and he has the ability to drop down to a pool of water. He can puddle underneath doors, spray his way in. He has great one-liners, and he does have the way to kill people in unique ways, and they use all practical effects in this one. So it's a fun movie, Christmas movie type thing. It's not anything that's getting taken serious, and they know that. And the acting overall in this one is pretty decent. I mean, the biggest name person in here is going to be Shannon Elizabeth in one of her first roles. And we get to watch her die. So she knew her part. And then she did many more horror movies where she died some more. Alright, so I'm going to call this halfway through and tell you the new horror trope that I learned from Christmas horror movies, watching all 25 of these. And boy, do they love to kill dogs. Generally, I keep track of whether or not a dog dies in a movie because my wife doesn't want to see that on TV. So I have to know. But going into a bunch of Christmas movies, I did not expect that to be something I had to pay attention for. But in a lot of these movies, the dog dies. So if that bothers you, I would make sure you check first before you go and watch them. Number 12. While She Was Out. This is a fun revenge type movie. It reminds me of the subgenre of like the rape revenge, like Last House on the Left and I Spit on Your Grave, but you don't have the rape aspect that most people can't stand. So you get some of the same verbal talking that happens in those movies in this one. And you also get a bunch of fun, brutal kills in this one, and you get a woman who is fighting for her life, and she goes to some pretty dark, sadistic places to get to where she needs to be, and then the ending of it is like the little cherry on top, like it is with all these revenge movies. It was a fun watch. 11. I have A Christmas Horror Story, and this one is another anthology movie for the Christmas season, which has, I think it's 4 different short stories in it to watch. And this one is just kind of overall fun. You're watching a bunch of different stories play out throughout the whole movie, so it's not like one story, then the next, then the next. You're bouncing around from each one, and I just found this one to be more entertaining. You had a nice Krampus story in there. You had Santa fighting himself from zombie elves. And the kicker of the whole thing is the fact that you find out that the guy who thinks he's Santa and fighting killer elves is killing everybody at the mall where he's working. And you see the bloodbath and everything else from it. So it has a nice little tie-in at the end. And it ends up being a lot of fun. I just wish it would have showed how the other stories that you're watching in it also tied into stuff that was happening in real life as well. Maybe everything could have been happening at that mall of different real life stuff, but they just tied in one. Number 10 is newcomer on the list. It's a Wonderful Knife. So this movie is obviously playing a copy of It's a Wonderful Life, and it follows the same beats of that movie, but in obviously a horror fashion. It is a slasher film, and it has two people that I like watching in movies and TV shows. You got Joel McHale and you have Justin Long. I think Joel McHale plays the part very well in the movie, and I think Justin Long is playing over the top like he's told to, and he plays that creepy, weird role pretty well. I was surprised. And a lot of the kills are fun and brutal, and it has a fun little story to it. Ties everything up in a bow like you would expect. And it's just a good, fun Christmas movie. 9 is Black Xmas, the remake of Black Christmas from 2006, which takes everything there is from the original and it changes pretty much everything except for the fact that you do get somebody killed with a bag over their head. So this one, it kind of goes a little with the tropes and things that you hear from the original, but the deaths are definitely a lot more graphic and a lot more brutal because we're in newer times and we can do that. And it takes a big spin on why Billy is killing the way that he's killing in this one, and you just have a little bit of everything. It has that 2000s charm. It does have the backstory of what most people don't like. Just a little bit of everything. If you haven't seen it, I would say check it out. It's a fun watch. Number 8, I have the classic Gremlins. So I didn't see Gremlins till about a couple years ago, so I do not have the nostalgia everybody else does have for it, but it is still a good family horror Christmas movie. I say family because depending on if you have small kids, there is some things said in this that might ruin something for them. Best way I can put that. But it is, obviously, everybody knows what gremlins are. You have the cute little fuzzy things, and you can't feed them after midnight. You can't let water touch them, or they turn into the green monsters that are sadistic and trying to kill everything. It's a fun movie. There's some fun tropes, and it has that nice 80s, 90s cheese to it that you remember as a kid. So if you watched it, it's probably high on your list. For me, it still made it to number 8 for this year. 7, Await Further Instructions, a movie that I watched this year thinking I had never seen it, and I actually did watch this one before. It's about a family who's all together in a house meeting for Christmas Eve. Everybody has their own personalities by a long shot, and they get trapped in a house and they have to pay attention to what the teleprompter on the screen is telling them in order to survive, and things go down a dark, twisted way, including the surprise ending where you don't know what's happening till you find out. And overall, it's a pretty good movie. The tension builds. There is some emotion in the movie as well, in a sense. It hits up on some fears and tropes people have based on different diseases and modern medicine. And then there's also the foreigner hatred that happens in this movie as well. They hit on a few different things, and I think they do it well, but not heavy-handed to where it's like it's preaching to you. So overall, it is a good movie. Everything that's shot looks well, and the acting is done well. 6, I have Anna and the Apocalypse. This movie is weird, depending on what you like. Now, I am actually a fan of watching musicals, so having a horror, comedy, zombie musical kind of hit a lot of different pieces for me of things that I enjoy. Zombies, because you have some brutal deaths and you always have some great kills, and there's just a lot of fun watching people destroy zombies. and musical numbers that go with it where they actually kind of make sense. The beginning started off a little slow, so if you watch it, just know that if you don't like it in the first 15-20 minutes, to give it a little bit longer, because the songs and everything do get better, and it really starts to dive into everything that's going on. And it does have one of my favorite kills ever in a movie. If you've seen it, you know. If you haven't, go check it out. And if you really just want to know, leave a comment and I will tell you which one I'm talking about. 5. Better Watch Out. A movie that I had seen advertised nowhere, but it always popped up on Netflix and Peacock, and I just never took the time to watch it. And then with this list, I decided to this year. And it's a movie I'm glad I watched because it definitely subverted my expectations of what I was going to see. Where it starts off as like a home invasion type movie, which I always love home invasion movies. That turns into like a Home Alone-esque type movie. And then it flips everything right on its head and becomes a psychotic type movie. And everything plays out the way that you're expecting it to, almost, but not quite. And the twist ending on it in the end always makes it a lot of fun. So I would say if you haven't seen it, hopefully that entices you to watch it. Check it out. It's on Peacock right now. Number 4, Black Christmas from 1974. So this movie is a classic. If you haven't seen it, it's probably the first slasher movie ever made, depending on that and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It has all of the horror tropes that you expect to see from a slasher. Halloween took a lot of beats from this movie, and it has kind of the cool, the killer's in the house, phone calls going on, it's a Christmas setting, people die one by one, and nobody knows who the killer is until you get to the very end. So a lot of things that you see in horror movies today took bits and pieces from this one, because this one had a little bit of it all. And it definitely has an eerie creepiness to it that kind of holds throughout the entire film. So that explains why it would be considered a classic to most people. This is the first time watch for me, so it was a little bit slower because I've seen obviously so many movies and it's made in 1974. But it holds the tension well enough, so that's why it makes it at number 4. Number 3, I have Krampus. Krampus is just a fun horror comedy movie that is shot very well. It's the great story of the kid who hates what's going on and just wishes everything would go away. And that note makes its way to Krampus, and he makes sure he takes care of business. You have great practical effects in here. You got Krampus, who looks awesome at the end of the movie. You have his little elves that are going around getting people. Then you have the toys that come to life. And everything about it just kind of is a fun, wild ride of what you would expect for a horror movie to be about. They hit pretty much every different type of character that you would think to have. And obviously, the acting in the movie is great. You have a bunch of stars in this movie. So I find this one to be a lot of fun. I give it like a 4.5 out of 5. 2 is The Advent Calendar, a French film that is on Shudder, about a girl who receives an advent calendar and it's given some rules. And one of the rules is if you start eating the chocolate, you have to continue to eat the chocolate or he will kill you. You can't throw it away or he will kill you. And whatever you're supposed to do with each one of these pieces of candy, make sure you do it. Once you eat the candy for 24 days, then you're done. It's a kind of fun, wild ride where eat a piece of candy, okay, tastes good. Eat a piece of candy, you get to talk to your dad who has Alzheimer's. Eat a piece of candy, you start to learn the ability to walk again because this woman is a paraplegic in a wheelchair. And as the story goes along, it progresses. There are some cool things where maybe it's not a piece of candy that comes out. Something bad happens to her, and you see a guy who threw her out of his vehicle his vehicle rolls out. And when the dog attacks the vehicle, that's what happens to the vehicle in real life. So it has a lot of good and bad with the advent calendar pieces that are happening. And then it kind of continues to portray and tell a story and lead you to an ending that I would say was very successful. It was very satisfying ending to the movie. I don't want to give too much away because I did like this one a lot. It was one of those surprises. I didn't expect to like it as much as I did, but if you haven't seen the Advent Calendar on Shudder, go check it out there. That is the only streaming service that has it. I mean, if you have Prime, you can watch Shudder on Prime, so you can see it that way. But I would say it's definitely worth the watch. All right, so we have the crescendo. If you like this list and you find it a lot of fun, leave comments down below. Give me a like. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more stuff like this. Give me suggestions. This one was pretty easy to come up with because it's Christmas, but if there's any other holidays or maybe series of movies that you'd like to see ranked, let me know. I will get right on it. But saving the best for last, the numero uno for Christmas horror movies that I watched is Deadly Games, aka Dial Code Santa, which is another French film. And as I've learned through my process of watching horror movies, I do seem to love French films. I liked this one. Obviously, the Advent Calendar was French. I love High Tension, Martyrs. There is just a bunch of French horror movies that I like. I would say it's kind of the unforgivingness that's behind the French. And with this movie, you have a kid who kind of plays like he's a Rambo type character. He's a rich kid. His mom works at a toy store. He's a very smart kid. And he uses his computer to talk to Santa Claus to find out, hey, is Santa real? Is he coming to visit me? And he ends up talking to some guy who's kind of a creep. And then you kind of see the story of the guy and how the guy ends up meeting the mother of the kid and making his way to the kid's house. And then you get a Home Alone-ish type setup where there's a lot of fun traps, there's a lot of Christmas-oriented stuff. But what does this movie its justice is the kills are there. Some are graphic, some are not. But it's the overall acting, and it's the story, and then it's the story arc of the characters that you're watching. It's one of those few movies where you're watching it and it'll actually like pull emotion from you when you're watching it. It actually makes you feel something. And I thought that was very rare because I watch a lot of horror movies and there's not very often that I actually get any feelings while watching a horror movie. And this one actually made me feel something. And that would be the reason why it makes it to the top of my list. If you haven't seen it, I would say watch it. I know I watched it on Shudder this year, so it is still there for a few more days. I don't know if it's on any other streaming service, but it is Deadly Games, aka Dial Code Santa. It's from 1990. Alright, so that's my list. Do you agree with the 25 films I ranked? Is there any movies I missed that you would have put on this list? If so, let me know in the comments. Until the next one, rest in peace.